should we jump right into it? So why don't you tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
sure.
yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me and great to be on the show. But ultimately, I'm one of the co-founders of Hugo,
Mm-hmm.
and Hugo is one place for team meetings, notes, and tasks. We're passionate about meetings and the way teams meet. And the way we go about that is changing the way teams collaborate around meeting and meeting workflows with meeting notes at the core. So for some context on the problem and how we came about it, I come from a background as a corporate attorney, and my co-founder comes from a background in product. And we spent our whole lives in meetings. And what was so fascinating to us is that so much had changed about the way we work. If you think about even pre-pandemic, the move
Mm-hmm.
to remote distributed teams, more autonomous and flatter management structures, the explosion of SaaS and the 150 different tools we use every day and the way we collaborate, work
Yep.
looked nothing like it did even 5 or 10 years prior.
Oh
But
yeah,
if you think
things
about the
change
way
so
we meet,
quickly. Things
that's
change
right.
so
But the way we
quickly.
meet hasn't, right? For generations, it's the same deal. Sure, we have Zoom now, but it's still, you need everyone in the meeting, either in the room, virtual, or otherwise. Not many people prepare. And when they do, they just write some notes themselves. We all get to the meeting. It's expensive because it's all about time. We have this great discussion. And as soon as the meeting ends, most of the value dissipates. Things
Mm-hmm.
slip between the cracks. Nothing gets followed up. We forget what we actually spoke about. We spend the next meeting recapping and overlapping the outcomes of this meeting. And that really blew our minds. Why hadn't meetings changed if everyone else had? So we saw the meeting note as like the atomic unit to represent the value of a meeting. If we could just capture what happened in a meeting and the insights from that, the actions that needed to happen, we could extract so much more value out of meetings and make the meetings truly valuable to everyone else in the business who wasn't in the room. And that was the impetus for Hugo.
Interesting. So how does it work? I mean, so you're in. I'm assuming it has a video component like Zoom, and then while you're in the meeting, are you sort of capturing notes at the same time? Is everybody capturing notes, or I mean, I'm intrigued by the concept of the atomic unit of meeting notes. Like, how does that
Sure.
work?
Yeah, totally. So the way Hugo works is you still use Zoom or however you want to hold your meeting, maybe in person even. Hugo helps you prepare. So it's all based on your calendar. So it's a web application and a mobile application. We bring in your calendar and we see who you're meeting with when, the contacts and companies. You click the relevant meeting, and before the meeting, you can set an agenda. So here's what I'd like to talk about. Most of our customers use templates, so you can
Mm-hmm.
choose the right template for the right meeting. You can then share that out to the attendees before the meeting. Everyone can contribute, and we all walk into the meeting with a common understanding of what we want to cover.
Mm-hmm.
During the meeting, we're on a Zoom like this. I have Hugo open and I write notes like I do at the moment. It's collaborative, a bit like a Google Doc. So if you and I are on the same team, you can jump in and add to it. But while I'm writing notes, I can highlight actions, which get turned into tasks and tickets, either in Hugo or your favorite project management tool, Asana, Trello, Todoist, and the like. It syncs with my CRM, for example, if this is a customer meeting, and integrates with 20 odd other tools. And then when I'm done, I save my note. I can share it out to the team via Slack or Microsoft Teams. I can email it back to other attendees, and we have this record of what transpired in the meeting. We've all contributed to it collaboratively, and because it's built on top of your calendar, it's organized by the contacts and companies. So I can see it's linked to the previous meetings with the company that other people have related to that project in a really organized way in that repository, rather than in folders and documents and other places we're all used to.
Right. Well, so I'm curious when you say it's like Google Docs, like what's the big differentiator? Because what's to stop me
Yep,
from doing the same thing? Like I could have like a
good
doc sitting
question.
right beside here,
Yeah.
and everybody in the team could be writing into the same document, so you could be sharing there. But it's like, what's the big differentiator?
Yeah, so the two key differences that I'd call out, one is it's calendar based. So the thing about Google Docs, which is a great place for documentation and writing specifications and contracts and other things like that, is it's not designed for meetings, because when I want to go and find that Google Doc, and we've all been there, you'd never to be seen again once it's been closed, right? You're searching on
Yeah.
text and the like. I can go and surface relevant notes and outcomes from meetings organized by the contact and company. So when I want to know, find the meeting, what happened previously with Atlassian, I search Atlassian, it conclusively pulls that in from the calendar data, and I can go and see all the linked contacts and companies going back at all time. So that's one, and that obviously lets you be proactive by having all the related content there. And the second is the integrations. As actions and insights come up and takeaways, in one click, I can send them out to all my tools, whether that be my CRM, my project management tool, wherever work gets managed and done.
No, I love the sound of that, because basically what I do is I do that exact thing, but I do it manually, right? So I take notes, and I have a whole bunch of notes in a doc, whether it's a Word doc or Google Doc. And then at the end of the meeting, I go, okay, this is an Asana task. This goes here. This goes here. I mean, what do I do? Do I just highlight it and then like click a button and it becomes a task in Asana?
Yep, exactly. That's exactly it.
That's it. How does it know that's what I want? How does it know it's a task? I mean, do you
when you highlight it, an action menu on the right pops up and says, what do you want to do with this? And you say, create a task in Asana, or create a Hugo task, or send it out to Trello. And there's a couple of quick choices. I want it to be in this project, so I want it due then and assigned to this Asana user. And as soon as you save your note, that gets pushed out.
Oh, fantastic. So it's like SaaS, right? So it works with all calendaring systems out there. Like if I'm using Outlook or something else, do I have to have an Outlook plugin, or does it work with Microsoft products as well? Or is it more of a Google thing?
No, it works with Google and Microsoft products, any of the cloud hosted products. So Microsoft 365 as it's now called, and Google Suite and Gmail.
Would I have to use it in the web version though? I mean, I can't actually have it in my Outlook.
It's not an Outlook plugin. So you'd use the Hugo web app. So you'd go to our website a bit like you would in Asana, for example.
Right. So can you give me some examples of use cases that you've done with this thing and how it's sort of transformed workflow from what it was like before to what it's like now?
Yeah, absolutely. So a common use case that we often enter organizations through is a customer-facing role. So I'm in customer success. I meet customers all day, and I take notes at the moment in my own tool. I'm meant to keep my CRM up to date. The product team and engineering team really want to hear what customers are saying, and of course, I have follow-up meetings with the customers and trying to figure out what we discussed last time and if I've done all the actions I need. So Hugo. You have your plan for the day. You can go and prepare for all your meetings before, and I can also do that collaboratively with my customer, so they know what we want to discuss and they can add to the agenda as well. We start the meeting. We take notes while we're meeting. All the actions and takeaways I will capture in Hugo as I'm doing it, pushed out to the relevant tools. My CRM's auto sync, so there's a note logged in my CRM against the deal or the contact, so that's all up to date. I save my note when I'm finished. I might have an internal and external version of it, so a note goes back to the customer saying, here's what we discussed, here's what you're going to do, here's what I'm going to do. The internal version may have a slightly more honest account of what happened. And when I save my note, I have my Slack integration set up. So it shares that out to the relevant Slack channel. So the product org and other people in the business get that feed of insights from the front line. And next time we meet, when I'm preparing for my next meeting, the related notes features pulled up the last meeting and said, here's what you discussed last time. Here's what everyone said they would do. And here's the status of all those items, along with reminders and follow-ups and that, which Hugo triggers in between the meeting, of course, to make sure it's actually done before the next meeting starts.
Right. Well, I love the sound of this because this is pretty much exactly what I do. Like I take notes in here, and then I go, okay, this is a task, this is a to-do item, this is this, then I transcribe it over into the other thing, whether it's paper or online. So it sounds like exactly like the way I do things. Like how did you come up with this? Like where did you get the concept from?
Yeah, so we actually started, I spoke earlier about the problem space and why we were interested in solving for this problem, but we actually went about solving it in a different way to start. We thought the problem was around meeting preparation, but a different sort of part of meeting preparation. And we had a mobile app that was focused on that, and it was growing quite slowly. And we were trying to get our heads around what the problem was and how to achieve product market fit and what the opportunity was there. And my co-founder, Josh, and I spent a lot of the time out of the office talking to customers and trying to do that research and understand that. And we found a big disconnect formed between what we knew in the meetings we were having and the value to the rest of the business. We had a team of 8 at the time. So we built for ourselves a quick Slack integration that would ping us after every meeting and say, hey, you just finished this meeting with Sarah, what happened? And I would reply to the Slack integration saying, it was a good meeting, here's what we did, here are the actions. And then we used Trello at the time for managing tasks. So we added on a Trello integration. Instead of having bullet point actions, I'd create Trello tasks straight from that. And we saw the organization transformed overnight. It was like we took the whole company to every meeting because everyone was across the insights. And as we were talking to customers about the product at the time, in the same space, but solving something different, they were more excited about how we were working as an organization than the product we were selling. So Hugo became Hugo, as we say, and then that was how Hugo was born.
I love it. So you pivoted basically. You took the one piece of the software that you had, and you took it to your customers, and your customers sort of drove you to pivot it in a different way. So it wasn't quite like design thinking, but you did kind of sort of throw it out there and let them play with it, right?
Exactly. I mean, we solved a problem for ourselves, which, as the textbook says, is one of the best ways to build a business and build a product.
That's the first thing you do.
Yeah, that's right. So exactly right.
Excellent. So I want to talk a bit about your startup journey, because I mean, how big did you say you were? You said you were 8 at one point. Are you bigger now?
Yeah, now we're at 15.
Wow. Very nice. Very nice. So when you very first started, like, what made you decide to do this? I mean, you said you were an attorney. So it's like, if I was a lawyer, hey, that's pretty lucrative. Maybe I shouldn't do a startup. Like, why would I want the entrepreneur life? It's like, 100-hour day, 100-hour weeks, and blah, blah, blah. So it's a lot of work, right? So what made you decide to sort of pivot your life into being an entrepreneur?
Good question. The grass is always greener. There's definitely days I dream about having a job with a normal salary and not have to worry on vacation. So look, I think there's a few interesting things. I came from professional services, being an attorney, right? So the way you create value is by putting in the hours, and that's it. If I'm not working, there's no value created. And
exactly.
That for me was really frustrating, that one-to-one relationship. And obviously it's very important. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of roles like that out there that work that way. But I was infatuated with this idea of being able to create value while I slept. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about I could build something that creates value for others while I'm not even there. And software does that for sure. That's one of probably the most effective ways to do that. And I've always had that entrepreneurial sort of flavor. I've done a few things through college and built a couple of small businesses, and I really love the idea of being able to do that, to build things. And I really got uncomfortable watching huge problems transpire, particularly around meetings in the legal world, and no one caring or wanting to do anything about it. I was itching every day to fix that. And the funny thing about being a lawyer is, because you bill your time, you could actually quantify the problem. I remember vividly walking out of one particular meeting with like 9 or 10 people there, and I was doing the math in my head. It felt like it was such a waste of time, that meeting. One person spoke, and I was like, okay, look at the bill. That's a $6,000 meeting or something ludicrous.
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem was like, being rubbed in my face every day. So those two insights together, I knew I wanted to do something. Meetings were a real pain point. My co-founder Josh is a longtime friend of mine, and he was sharing a similar problem through a different lens. He was already in San Francisco working for a tech company here, and doing a lot of business development in his product role, and same sort of story. So that was the drive to solve this problem that I experienced every day in a way where we could create value while we slept, so to speak.
Nice. So when you guys met, did you fund it yourself, or did you get investors, or how did you start?
Yeah. So in the early days, friends and family funding to help make the first few hires, and then we raised money from some investors in the Bay Area.
And how did you do that? I mean, did you just did you do pitches to VCs, or did you just poll your friends and family or people who knew, or I mean, how did you get to that next level of investment to take you over the top?
Yeah. So the first stage, the friends and family, it's more obviously person driven. So we're saying, look, this is a problem we care a lot about. We've done a fair bit of work, and we we're willing to take the jump and go all in on this, and this is why we think it's a big opportunity. And we might be wrong about how to solve it, but we're not wrong about the problem, and we're not wrong about us being the right people to solve it. And that helps to a point of investment. And then once we show some, for when we raised our seed round, which is like institutional from big funds, or big VCs here, at that point, it was a case of showing some traction. So just, external validation that it is a real problem and people like our solution. But again, our ability to execute, because the VCs know that it's not going to end up the way we started. So are we the right team solving the right problem? And does it look like we're onto something interesting? And at that point, it's a bit more metrics driven, but it's not huge revenue numbers and huge growth numbers. This is a real problem for real people.
And when you did your MVP, was it like an actual working product that you got out the door, or did you do some more testing it with like suboptimal products?
Yeah, it was a working product, but definitely suboptimal. So especially because we've had that pivot early on, we were sort of, time-wise, we'd spent time and money, but we had to go backwards and almost start from scratch from a product development standpoint. So it was a basic web app. We had only a couple of integrations to solve for first few customers. 10 was a magic number in our head. If we can just get to 10 customers, you get real value from Hugo, use it all the time, and would tell their story. We could show something. But by the time we raised our seed round, we're in the thousands of customers already. And what's really great about, as building software in 2021, you obviously need the skill and people on board, but it's cheaper and easier than it's ever been before.
Absolutely.
The AWS world, and we use Webflow and few other CMSs for the front end side of things, and open APIs, and it's a lot easier to get to that point than it ever has been. So it wasn't a huge hurdle to have something that was working, but still, a little bit unpolished.
Yeah. So you're still a web app then, and you'll always be a web app, or are you planning on doing mobile versions as well?
So we do have an iOS app as well, Android coming soon, and we will go down the desktop path as well, more for offline note taking and those sorts of use cases. But we started as a web app.
So can you tell me about like your click moment, like the moment you like realized, wow, this is going to be a big success? Like when did that happen?
Yeah, and we're not. The big success.
You might not be. You might not feel like you're there yet, but you're already on your way. If you got thousands of customers now, there must have been a moment between, oh my God, I don't think this is going to work, to yes, it's happening. Like, can you describe that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. It would have definitely been, customer 2 or 3 who, in that first 10 category early on, when they described their daily workflow with Hugo, and they talk as if it's like a core piece of a critical piece of infrastructure that the business couldn't run without. And you get that imposter syndrome where you're like, our little, piece of software that's, they're like, yeah, of course, like, Slack and Hugo and Zoom, like, this is how our entire business runs.
Yeah, all these billion-dollar companies.
That's right.
And
Hugo dropped in the middle there. Exactly. So that for me, the penny definitely dropped, and I was like, wow, maybe we are going to build something big. And I think we're very lucky in that we're working on a problem. There's 2 sides of the coin, but we're working on a problem that's well understood. It's very easy to exacerbate the pain point. All I have to do is start chatting about meetings, and just like you did earlier, everyone nods along and gets it. So we didn't have to focus on that so heavily. That was well accepted. We focus on the solution first, and that's where most of the effort is. And a lot of products obviously have to do both effectively, because people don't know they have a problem.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem with disruptive innovation, is that if it's too far out, you need to educate people. But this is an easy problem to identify. It's like everybody hates meetings and everybody hates doing things. So it's great, and I love the fact that it's kind of like you solve for yourself first, and then you went out and you did that pivot. How much time passed between sort of like the time you had that working product and then you realized this is not going to work, and you had to pivot?
Too long. 18 months.
It always is. Feels like forever, right? You're working towards this thing, and then like when you got that feedback which said, hey, this is not the right thing. I mean, what happened there? Did you have an urge to say, you know what, these guys don't know what they're talking about, we should keep going in the direction we're going? Or did you immediately say, yeah, you're right, we should probably pivot?
No, it took too long. 18 months to 2 years, I'd say, of pursuing that first. And I think that, it's funny. I mean, if we talk about biggest mistakes we've made, I think one of the toughest, the biggest mistakes we've made is leaving distribution too late. The old school of thought, you build a great product and they will come. The Paul Graham famous quote from a long time ago definitely doesn't hold true. And what I said earlier about lower entry barriers and never having been easier to build software has meant that the challenge in many cases now is go to market, not actual
Yeah.
product development.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. That's not the problem anymore.
That's right. And then what that meant for us was that we thought it was a go-to-market problem, but actually it was a product market fit problem. The product was wrong to solve that problem. So that's why we waited too long. Whereas if we'd focused on go-to-market and distribution first, if I'd gone out with a PowerPoint presentation and tried to sell to 100 customers and realized that no one wanted to pay for this product that didn't exist, we would have realized that before we'd written a line of code potentially. So that's why it was too long, and it took a lot of it took us taking a pretty well built product to market and watching it not get adopted.
Oh my God, that must have been horrible. That must have been horrible.
Totally. I've pushed that out of my mind. That feels like forever ago now. Totally.
Fantastic. So that was, like you said, it was 18 months, and then you sort of pivoted. And how long did it take you to pivot?
Very quick. Once we said this is what we need to do, we hit the gas. At that point we flipped. So we sort of split in that. We went into mad research phase and we're sending those insights straight back to design and development so quickly to get something out the door as quick as we could. So within a few months, we had an MVP of the new product. Again, the MVP came from that hack that allowed us to share those insights more rapidly. So it's a little bit incestuous there, but it meant that within a few months we had something to market, and we knew pretty quick that it would stick. One, we couldn't live without it as a company ourselves, which usually means there's other people like you. But as soon as something was out the door and we saw that early adoption of the first 10 odd customers, as I mentioned earlier, that was the point. We're like, okay, we're onto something.
Yeah. So there was the first period, there was a struggle to meet the fit, and then as soon as you pivoted, it's like immediately got snapped up. So It's interesting. It's interesting you should say that. So I mean, I've heard this from a number of different sources. Like it's the same with. It's like on the one hand, people say, "Oh, you got to persist, and then eventually you'll succeed." But in other cases, you actually see those kind of sort of pivots and immediate success. So I mean, it sounds like you should have pivoted earlier, right?
Yeah. Yep. So you know what? I've asked that question of advisors, investors, anyone that I respect so many times. I don't have an answer, and I have that problem to this day with the marketing experiment. Should we be, have grit and stick with it and persist, or should we cut our losses and move on? And I would love to know. I don't think there's a good answer to that in general. I think they're two opposing forces that you have to balance. But in general, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. It's usual like if you're innovating, obviously people don't know what they want before you put something before them. But if you have something that demonstrates the value and they can engage with, and there's no adoption, well, that has to say something. So, like Airbnb, for example, when I first heard about, all the people that tell the story when they first started pitching, people thought it was ridiculous, right? Who's going to want randoms in their living room and who are going to pay them to sleep in their living room?
Exactly.
Fair enough. But we now have a platform. They then had the platform. They were signing up homes themselves, and you could go to this site and you could book homes to stay. The most basic MVP, and they would be on the phone, hooking it all up. They had a whole lot of people signing up to use it, and I think that's the key. That's the key difference. If they didn't persist before that, they would have been in trouble, made the wrong call. But at that point afterwards, there's some proof of traction. There's real people that show value. So I don't know the
That,
answer, but I think
and
that's
then
the
well,
distinction.
but that's the thing. It's kind of like you're backward looking now. It's like, well, if I knew what I knew now, then I would have just done that MVP, that
Yeah,
first MVP, and not
yeah,
spent the 18 months. But if you didn't spend the 18 months, you never
that's
would have
right.
gone to the point
Exactly.
where
Yeah.
you would have had this. So it's good that
That's how
you,
I
it's,
rationalize it to myself when I feel like I've wasted half my life with every mistake we made. But it's
well,
true. It's true. Yeah.
but it basically just leads to the point that your MVP really does have to be the minimum, like absolute minimum viable product, right? I mean, because there's
Yep.
so many. I mean, I got caught in the same trap. I had a startup maybe about 10 years ago where we did the exact same thing, where we got the thing, we had an MVP, and my co-founders didn't want to launch it because it didn't have this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature, and it's like, we don't even know if anybody wants to buy this thing.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
get the
Yeah.
absolute minimum
Something.
out the door. And then, when we get some feedback, they might just say, we need something completely different. And it sounds like that's what
Yep.
happened to you guys as well. Cool.
Exactly.
So
That's the advice that everyone always gives and no one ever listens to, myself included. As
exactly.
founders, we're emotional and wedded to a particular solution and what we're doing. And we feel like you can't get that out the door. It doesn't solve. It's embarrassing. It's ugly. People don't want it. Uh, Reid Hoffman, the founder and chair of LinkedIn, he said, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've left it too late. And again, the textbooks all say that, but it doesn't feel right because you don't want to go
Yeah.
and show your ugly child to the world that's not properly developed. We're proud and excited and passionate about solving this problem with this solution, but
I blame
advice
Apple for that. I blame Apple for that because all of their stuff is so beautifully designed that you have to have something beautifully designed. You can't just put out an ugly site from 1999 out there and say, well, we're just testing the functionality. It's also got to look good. But anyway, but that's another story. So I wanted to ask you a bit about your go-to-market strategy and your marketing. Like, how did you get those customers? I know you were looking for those 10 core customers. How did you market yourself beyond that? I mean, how did you grow the business?
Totally. So today, most of our acquisition's organic. It's content driven. We don't spend much money on paid or other channels like that. And that's the sort of one category.
Did you in the past though? Did you in the past to sort of kickstart?
We didn't. No,
okay.
Now, if anything, we're starting to just to get to the next stage of growth, but we didn't in the early days. What was surprising about that is it's very textbook and boring. It's what the playbooks have said for a long time, and you kind of assume that doesn't work. It does, especially for a space and a theme around like what we do with meetings. People read, they write, they search, they talk. Meetings are a very rich area. If we were obviously in a very specific niche, maybe it's not the case. So doing the standard stuff, if you like, got us a long way. We didn't have to do a ton there. I think virality and referral and those sorts of things has been interesting because in one sense, it takes critical mass before enough people talk about your product to actually drive meaningful acquisition. If you have 100 people using your product, even if they love it every day, how often are you at a party where you talk about pre-pandemic where you spoke about Zoom, right?
Yeah.
It's just not what I do. If you're talking about the challenges in, meeting people, sure, will come up, but that might happen in 6 months' time for the first time for you. So the critical mass snowball effect of referral takes a long, long time. And again, people can love your product, but it doesn't drive referral traffic that way. Mm-hmm. Another key driver for us is trying to think about growth in the way we build product. So product-led growth. Meetings are inherently viral. People are meeting others all day. How do we leverage that? And we do that at the moment predominantly through sharing. I mentioned earlier some of the workflows where I can say, before we meet, here's the agenda, what should we cover? And you're like, oh, that's really cool. What is this Hugo thing? So building that into the product was a helpful kickstart early on for that natural growth. But other than that, it's just a case of hustling in a disproportionate way for the early customers. Podcast referrals, speaking at meetups, one customer feels inefficient, but you can get to your first 20, 30, 40, 50 pretty quickly that way. I actually remember going and getting a day pass at a WeWork in San Francisco and going to a few of them, sitting around and trying to start conversations in the common area. And like,
I love that. It's so low tech, but it works, right?
I turned my screen. What do you think? And again, it's totally inefficient and hugely expensive from a time standpoint, but each customer at that point was like infinitely important. So, and then that's while we're building out the playbook stuff, the content, the organic side of things, and the like. Which meant we got to a certain scale of growth without spending much money, which has been fantastic.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so it's time to think like a futurist. It's 2031. It's 10 years from now. Where will you be?
Yeah.
Are you,
Where
have you
will I
take, are you
be?
like the new Slack? People are like, oh, you know, your
Yep.
billion-dollar business and you're a
Yep.
unicorn. Everyone's like, oh, I have to have Hugo on my desk. I
Yep.
can't survive without it. Is that where you are, or
Yeah,
where do you think you're gonna
yeah,
be?
yeah. I do think so. We're building a category of software around meeting management, meeting workflow software. At the moment, when you start a business, you go for your chat app and your mail and calendar app and payroll and the like. No one thinks about meetings other than maybe a Zoom or something to physically hold them. We definitely see ourselves as creating that category with others in it naturally. So alongside project management and the like, you'll have meeting management or meeting workflow software. So that's definitely the plan. I will, by 10 years from now, we will be the meeting OS, the meeting operating system for millions of companies.
Well, I want you guys to have some AI behind it so that it records the meeting and then takes notes automatically and then automatically sends tasks so that nobody has to take notes. Are
Totally.
you there yet?
You know what's really interesting about that? We're actually, when we started the company, our domain, our TLD, the top level domain was hugo.ai.
Yeah.
And we changed to Hugo.team. And the reason is it relates to the hype cycle. You probably heard about the Gartner hype cycle, where we were in the trough of disillusionment as a world, I think, around AI, where people
Yeah.
expected magic.
Yeah.
And people already take notes. It's a behavior that's already there, which is great. We didn't have to teach people or force people to do something manual. You're doing it. You showed me before.
Yeah.
And as soon as you put the AI piece in, everyone's like, oh, cool, I can now do nothing and the
Yeah.
like.
That's
And
exactly
with
what they think.
transcription,
Exactly
yeah.
what people think. When you say AI, it's like, oh, you're taking this off my hands.
No, AI, as you know, can help in automating repetitive tasks and analyzing big data sets. And there's certainly an opportunity there. Don't get me wrong. I think there are things we're thinking about and how we collect data to be able to do that down the track. But we certainly didn't want this. Okay, cool. Automate my life for me. Expectation, because it's only going to lead to to disappointment. And I think, by the way, transcription is, for everyday meetings, other than sales training and the like, is a big red herring, because people love the idea of not writing notes and getting them transcribed. But I don't know about you, but if I share 8 bullet points and a few tasks with the rest of the company, they get a lot of insight. If I share 7 pages of notes word for word about what happened in the meeting, no one's ever going to look at it again. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
the problem we have with transcription. Until AI and natural language understanding is at a point where you can identify the takeaways and the actions, it's not helpful for most meetings.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, because it takes me a while after a meeting to sort of collate everything and then have the action items set up and everything. So there's got to be that
Exactly.
human filtering mechanism right now. But I
Spot on.
can't wait for the day when, even if it just transcribes and it's go, okay, that guy just said something that looks like a task, so I can highlight it and go boop, Hugo it. There you go.
Here you go. I
You're
love
a
it. We'll
verb
take
now.
that. Thanks.
Hugo it into a task, and then as it's recording everything. But the problem is that even transcription services even the really good ones kind of suck, because you
Yeah.
have to summarize it. You have to summarize it. You have to bullet
Hmm.
pointize it, right? I mean, no one's going to read that
Exactly.
after the
Yep.
and even when we
The only good
do.
use case I've seen is the Gong and Core, the sales training optimization, where you're
Yeah,
recording lots of sales calls,
yeah,
all for compliance purposes. But that's it. No one's going to read it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
And then
totally
people
agree.
say, oh, do you mind if I record this meeting for posterity? And then no one ever
Yeah.
listens it
Never
watches
looks
it
at it
again.
again.
So
Spot on.
I
Spot
think
on.
that's a problem. I mean, human beings are just so busy all the time that we definitely need AI just to help us to survive in this complex world. So you guys you
I
are
agree.
looking at building that kind of facility on, like, so maybe 10 years from now we will have some kind of automated transcription interface which will allow us to sort of pluck tasks out of it and stuff like that. Is that
Totally.
possible?
Yep. We're definitely thinking about that way. And the cool thing is, I think the way the world's going is those sorts of technologies are becoming commoditized. When we started Hugo with the first product, it was actually very AI centric, and we had to build natural language processing and summarization services ourselves. We had PhDs working on it. Now
Wow.
there's an AWS and Google API that does that to obviously a much better level. So I think those sorts of features and functionality won't even be that proprietary. Of course, we have that. Just like,
Yeah.
of course, it's hosted in the cloud and scales that way. So I totally think we will certainly be there before 10 years from now.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, so you can check out Hugo at hugo.team, Team. You can find me on Twitter, it's at Darren Chait, or on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Fantastic. So I'll put your contact information in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they'll do it that way. So thank you so much. It was very interesting. And I'm going to sign up right now. As soon as I get off, I'm signing up.
Good to hear. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.